Where? No!
Okay. What we're doing now is we're doing the second cycle test that I set for grade 11s. We're not going to do all of it. We're just doing the sections that we understand of it so far. And the first item here is your class diagram. Minus means it's private. And also here it indicates, I did try to indicate roughly the mark allocation that I'd give for things like this. And this is a bit inaccurate. I would give 1 mark for the access modifiers. So in other words, if you gave the correct access modifiers. And what that means is private, public, etc. like that. So 1 mark would be associated to that. Another mark would be associated to correct data types. And then another mark would be associated to correct names. That's especially if it was asked via English saying this is what it's got. But here they give you the data type, they give you the name. You have to be pretty silly to not actually do that. So the marks might not be directly associated along those lines. Default constructor is worth 2 marks. 1 mark is for giving the values to the default values to the fields, and the other mark would just be for the actual constructor method. Here as well, 1 mark for the method header and 1 mark for the actual assigning the values. Getters and setters, you'll see there's only 1 mark given overall for each of those, and the toString will be 3 marks. The toString is expected to be in the following format though as well. So that's why it's worth a bit more marks, not just for the method structure, but that as well. Now, so let's get coding this. I'm going to put this on to the other screen so I can see it while coding. On your guys' shared drive, you'll see that I've got a grade 10 memo. The reason why I've separated it, there's already a memo of the whole thing, but the grade 10 memo will only contain the files that you need. I'm just deleting this because it's just the desktop and it's what the Windows creates inside its folders to keep track of. I actually don't know exactly what it keeps track of, but it's a Windows creating file. It's nothing to do with here. So the first question, we want to create that class diagram. So we're going to go right click on our project, or you can right click on your package, which makes it even easier. New Java class, and we're going to call it phone. Create, and then that would have created your class phone. The fields that we have are, first of all, what are the access modifiers?
Private.
Okay, the access modifiers have a negative sign in front of them, which means it's private. And we've got a string manufacturer, comma, we've got another one for model, another one for date released. So those are our 3 string variables. You are welcome to do it on new lines. I can go private string this again, private string that, but for me I think that's a bit of a waste. And the last one is into battery. Now it wanted a constructor, it wanted the default constructor. So what was the shortcut I pressed for this? To open up that menu? Alt insert, and I go I want a constructor, I generate the constructor. I want my default thing to be manufacturer is equal to blank, my model is equal to blank, my date released equals to blank, and my battery is equal to 0. So just default null values. I'm going to put a comment where I believe the ticks should be, or where I would mark ticks. I would put a tick here. Are you guys okay with me just putting a T? So a mark would be assigned for that, and a mark would be assigned for this, the fact that I've initialized things to blank. Obviously it would apply to all of them. So it would be that, that, and that. Does that make sense? So that 1 tick would be applied for all the fact that you've initialized all 3 of those. That's where the marks would be associated with. The next one is a fully parameterized constructor, fail, where you tick all of the fields here and you'll generate it. That's the fully parameterized constructor. Ironically, in the question paper I made a mistake. I also mentioned something about RAM when there actually wasn't RAM. My fault on that. There shouldn't have been a RAM in there. Okay, so now we move down again. There would have been 1 mark associated to this here, and there would have been another mark associated to the fact that the variables had been initialized. For you guys, this is just alt insert, so it's really marks for nothing. It's really for free. Then I asked for the getters and setters, so I generate those. And again, here I would have had a mark for the structure of the method, and if I actually did return something. and then that would have been, I would have applied that. Did you do that for all of them as well? Otherwise you would get deducted a mark if it wasn't done for all of them. And then similar thing with your setter. So your setter you've already got. Here the main thing is just your method header that you had a item. Again, I would have just looked at one and I would have glanced over the rest to make sure you did it for the rest that we asked for. Okay, our toString method, we're going to generate our toString, and that would send it back. Already, just by doing that, we would have gotten 1 mark for the method header. Would have got another mark for our the fact that we returned something. But now this part we would have lost the mark for because ours is not in the correct format. So to be in the correct format, we would need to have manufacturer and then plus a dash space. That's not a dash, that's an equal sign. Dash space plus model. That's not model. Model plus, then you would want to put in this space in square brackets, plus the specs. Specs dash battery. Oh, I'm being an idiot. Specs dash battery space open brackets confusing plus battery plus close those brackets released space plus date released plus nothing. Oh yeah, so that's it done. It's now in the correct format. Happy birthday. Those are 3 marks. So that's the 3rd mark here. This is really easy marks. This whole thing is out of currently 13 marks, and we've done nothing special. We've done appending. The only slightly different thing is manipulating the string to be appended in a slightly different order. But then you're just saying, okay, get the whatever's stored in manufacturer, append a space and a dash and a space. Append the model, append that. I mean, this is string appending. I don't believe this. This you should have down now. Okay. The next thing that's happening is we've got okay, we've got that. The next question asks us. Let me go back and open up the question for you. You'll see it says create a method called getBatteryAfterYear. Now that's obviously the name of the method, so you keep that in your head. Now return is the other important word, and what other word are we looking for? What other word do we look for? We look for a name of the field, a return, and what else? A receives. Is there any receive in here? No one listening to me? No. Okay, in any method, you look for the following. Name of method in any question. Second thing you look for, what does it return? The third question you ask, what does it receive? A before E except after C. Now, what is the name of the method in this case? What does it return?
Battery.
What data type is that?
Int.
What does it receive?
Battery. Press.
Anywhere in there, does it mention, because nothing tastes like face guy. Anywhere, it's an old advert, it's before your time. Okay, now, basically, in this statement, nothing is, we have the battery. The battery is one of the fields, isn't it? It's one of the attributes. So we have the battery. We don't need to receive anything. So there are no parameters. Here, we're looking at return type. What we received, we're actually looking for parameters here. But in any method that where it's not just, that is what you're looking at, what are they asking, is you're looking for that. So in the first instance, we get getBatteryAfterYear is a name, it returns an int. So now we want to create this method structure. Public, what data type does it return? Int, and we're going to call it getBatteryAfterYear. Okay, and this will return the battery life after a year. So I'm just going to go return battery minus battery times 20 divided by 100. Do you guys get that part there? Do you guys get that? It asked me for battery minus, and it actually even told you up here, it gave you an example. And I think that general basic sense of maths you should know. If you want to get 20% less of something, you just take it minus 20% of it. And 20% is 20 divided by 100.
So can't you also just go battery times 80%?
You can't do 80% for one. There's no such, the percent sign won't work, but you could do 80 divided by 100, yes.
Oh, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Can you do 0.8 then?
You could also, well, yes and no. The problem with multiplying it by 0.8 is it'll give you a red underline. I'm glad you asked that question. And the reason why is it will then expect, it's not returning an integer. It's just returning a double. Now, and quite frankly, the question didn't say it had to be an integer. But, so you could return a double. Now, a double is just a data type that allows for decimal places. So I'm happy you asked that question because it's an important question. A double, float, real, those sort of data types return decimal places. Probably double is the most used. So if you did multiply it by 0.8, it would ask for it wouldn't round it off and that kind of thing. Okay, moving on. Sorry. Why are we yawning? We're going to move on to the next question. And the next question asks us, I want to delete this, I don't want this part of that question paper.
Whoa.
Okay, now the next one is to create a class called working with a field array of the class phone called phones of size 3. So all it's asking is it asking me to create another class. I'm going to go right click, new Java class, and I'm going to call this class, sorry, it should be called working. Right? Now, it asks me to create a field, which is over here, declare all my fields here, an array of the class phones. Now, it didn't specify whether the access modifier here, but generally speaking, all fields we make private unless it's a constant or stuff like that. That's just a rule of thumb. It's not the exact rule, but when you guys get to understand this a bit better, I'll go into when you call things private, why you call them private, when you go into a bit of system design a bit further. All right, anyway, private, we're going to now go, what is the data type? The data type is actually a class, it's phone. It's an array, so we put square brackets. We're going to call it phones, and we're then going to say is equal to new phones. And what size did it want to be? 3. Oops. Size 3. Okay, so we've created an array of the data of the phone class called phones of a size 3. Again, we could have created it of size 500 and added a counter. And after I finish coding this, I'm going to go and do that. But for now, let's just do exactly like the test asks, and I'm going to just make it of a size 3. It then says create a default constructor which will initialize 3 positions array with the following values. Okay, so it just asks to create a default constructor, and in here go phones position 0 is equal to new phone. So I'm initializing the position of the array. The manufacturer of the first one is LG. The model. Let me move this onto the other screen so I can, damn it, so I can see what's needing to add. So the first phone that we're initializing is LG. Remember, when you initialize a class, this is position 0 in the array, and I'm initializing it using the default constructor. It's the purpose of the constructor is to initialize it. And the type is a G3. Its battery is 3000. I actually set this test while I was busy looking for my new release date was next and then battery. So let's say this was released in 2014/08/02 and the battery is 3000. Okay, semicolon. The phones, I want to refer to the second one. How do I do that? I go 1 and I say equals new. Remember, make use of your control spacebar. You have no idea how often you'll do the following accidentally. If you don't use control spacebar, you'll do that, then you'll go, why is it not working? And it would freak you out for ages. So please make use of your control spacebar. It will suggest to you stuff. So in this case, it is going to be an HTC, and this is going to be a 1, and then we're going to have a date released being 2015-05-21. This technically was 07. And the battery here is 2840. Copy paste. Phone 2 is a Sony Xperia. I don't know why I'm actually recording this. I should have paused the video. My bad. Bad recorder. 0110. Okay, now in this case we're going to go. Sorry, this one is 3,400. Okay, so we're initializing in our default constructor. We're going to initialize all of them, and it asked me, the first question asked me to create a toString which will return all phones, instances of phones separated by a new character. I'm not going to ask you to do this sort descending. We're just going to run this question here. Now, moving on, alt insert. So toString. So we want to generate our toString. This time, though, we're not going to be returning this. I'm going to return sall. I'm going to create a string called sall, and I'm going to make it blank. I'm then going to loop through my array for our tab, and then I just go sall plus equals phones position I dot toString plus a \n. To explain that, I did go through that a little bit quickly, but to explain that, here the shortcut is for I. This will loop through the length of the array, and then will every single position I, so I will be 0, so it will run position 0 in the array dot toString. So it would say lg blah 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 blah, and append that to this string, and it will append at the end a it would append a \n, which was an enter, and then on the next line it would display that. Do you guys follow what I've done there? And guys, this stuff is even asked in your matric final. You'll have something where you have to loop through an array like this. Now, it says create an instance of the working class to set it up all phones and display upon startup. It asks us about the sort buttons and the update the display. We're not going to code the sort because we haven't done that. We're just going to get it to display on upload. Okay, so I created the GUI class for you. You didn't have to create this. It's already there. So it's easy enough to create. You'll see there's a sort button and future button. This text field is called txt display. You can see that in your navigator on the bottom right. If you can, I am recording the cursor this time, so you should be able to see that that text field there. It's been named as txt display. Now, in the source code, as a field, so here at the top, we are not coding in the main. The main creates an instance of itself, or its own, the same class that it's within. We are going to create a field of the working. So again, a fields are normally private unless otherwise specified. Working, and I'm going to call it work. And in my default constructor, remember default constructor's purpose is to initialize all fields. Now, believe it or not, how many fields do I have in this class? Well, I at least have one. I've created a field here, right? That's a field. But actually what I've got is I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got a field for the button. This button here is actually a field. This button here is a field. This text area is a field. That scroll pane that this text field is in is a field. So each of those are fields for us to work with. And we are adding a field. We're adding a field called work, which is of class type working. So here my button is of class type JButton. My panel is of class type JPanel. My scroll pane is of so forth. Okay, and what we're going to do is I want to create a method. So we're going to initialize our fields. Init components does that. Init components initializes our fields. We don't need to worry about that because it's generated code and initializes everything. We don't need to do that. But init components initializes our fields. Now that's an important concept. We've been learning you must initialize your fields in your constructor. Same thing happens here. GUI is my constructor here. It initializes the GUI components. Yeah. Now, what we got here is init components initializes all these fields. And that just happens for us. But we do need to initialize our work class, and we use that using the constructor. So work is equal to new working. Again, use your control spacebar. It makes your life a lot quicker and makes sure of less errors. Now, we want to create a method which would allow us to display all, and on that we would, oops, this method should be void display all txt display.setText to be work dot, and we would run inside our constructor, because on load up we wanted to display all. That's what the question asked. It said on the load up, create an instance of the working class, initialize it, and set up so that all phones will be displayed upon startup. So I created the method here. The reason why I created it here is because technically when I got the sort working, after I finished sorting, I'd want to update the display. So I'd need to run that method again. Does that make sense? So I coded it as a separate method, so if I need it again, I could use it. Now, just to run it so I can show you that it works, interestingly, the first time you run a program, it'll ask you what you want to set as your main class. You could have multiple main classes, and you can switch between which one you want to use to run. So you could have a test main class, which is text-based interface or whatever, test one, and then you could have your main GUI. You could have switch between different GUIs, and that's one of the reasons why we code like this, is we separate our working code from our user interface, because our user interface, if we're coding for Android, iOS, Windows, whatever, we don't want to have to change all of our backend as well. We only want to change the ones that we only want to change some of them. So we just change the front end. So that's why you can switch between your different classes to be used as your main class. In this case, we're just running this GUI, and when we run it, it should display the 3 phones that we created. At the moment, it's just being slow. Okay, and then you'll see here on the screen here, all 3 of the phones are displayed. Happy birthday. Make sense? Now,
My birthday?
it's your birthday.
What did you get me, sir?
I don't like a couple of things. One thing that I don't like, how many phones are we allowed to have?
3.
I don't like that. How would we change it so we could have more phones?
Make a list of these.
You could make a list, but now a list is, yeah, you don't deal with up until matric level. But I could make this size, and then I create a
So that's just a memory hub.
no, not particularly. It doesn't use up as much memory as you think, because it doesn't actually create 500 instances on the phone. It just creates 500 pointers, and pointers are tiny. So it just says, okay, I'm able to point to 500 phones, but they don't exist until you go equals new phone. It doesn't exist. Now, I would change it from this. I'm going to leave that here because I'm too lazy to code the whole thing again. But what you do is you'll create a method. It could be private or public. I want to make it public. Void add phone, and the add phone is going to receive. The first one is manufacturer, right? The next one is a model. The next one is a date of release, and the last one is, this is annoying,
So it should be an EM7 for manufacturer.
and then the last one would be a int battery. Okay, now inside this method, what we would do is we would go phones. What position would we be updating? What keeps track of what position in the array we are in? Num phones. So we would say phones position num phones is equal to new phone, and we would just send through those items there, and then we would go num phones plus plus. And now here, instead of doing this, if we wanted to add these 3 phones here, we would go just run add phone. We would just run add phone, and we would just run add phone. Does that make sense? And that would work equally as well. And this would be a better structure because now I could add as many phones as I wanted to, well, up to 500 at a later stage. Do you guys follow this? And now, here at the bottom, do I loop, now when I'm doing a toString, do I loop through till phones.length? Where do I loop until? Num phones, because num phones will have the numbers there. So basically what would happen if you, if I look at Excel as being RAM, I like the way of using this to describe RAM. If I use Excel to be RAM, I would have multiple pointers. 1, 2, 3. I don't know why I'm typing it all out, but I would have all the way up to 500. Okay, I'm not going to do up to 500 because that's just crazy. Okay, now realize they're just pointers. It hasn't actually reserved any memory location. But now, for example, pointer 0, when I initialize it, I could say it's referring to position G1, which would then technically be taking it up here. Well, let's say G2 because I want to actually put headings in there. So G2, and then remember we would have manufacturer. We have, what else do we have? Model, we have battery, date of release. I'm not going to type the whole thing up. But manufacturer would be LG, model G3, battery 3000, whatever the date is. And then this would then refer to, let's say, E5. And then that would have manufacturer, model, and so forth inside that memory location. So it's not reserved until it actually does create it or add it on. And your num counter will always, your num phone cell would always point to the next position, which you'll need to add to. Does that make sense? And then when you do add another one, you add another one to memory location L7. This would then be incremented to point to the next value. So you loop up until there. Does this make sense? Grant, you good? Cool. Now, if I go back to here, and I'm now doing this, I go to my GUI. I want to modify my GUI a bit. For one, okay, this layout is a board layout. I want to add a panel 2 here. I'm not exactly sure how this is going to work. This future button, I'm going to say new. So when the user clicks on new phone, I wanted to add a phone to my array. Now, obviously, when we click on new phone, I double click on it, or another way of doing it is right click events, action, performed. It adds an action listener, which means that the button will listen for the user's input. When the user clicks on it, it will invoke this method. So that's what's called invoke. It will call that method, invokes it. Now, when we invoke that method, I don't want you guys to code here often, unless you are directly working with the event. So unless you want to check what did the user do. In other words, if you want to check if the user right-clicked, left-clicked, middle mouse button, or what did he do. Whereas in this case, we don't. But if you code in here, every single time you needed to call this to do it again, you would have to send through this parameter. As well as, if I ever am marking this code, I have to look for it between all this other stuff as well. So generally what I suggest you guys do is create a method called public void add phone. And then inside the action performed, or the button, you would just run the add phone method. And inside the add phone method, what do we need? We need a string manufacturer. We need to get that from the user. And to do that, how do we get an input from the user at the moment? JInput, JOptionPane. Remember, you have to import it, so you must use Control Spacebar because Control Spacebar also imports it. Let me just go back here. You'll see that right now, what is up here? Nothing, no imports, right? When I go Control Spacebar Enter, it automatically imports javax.swing.JOptionPane because JOptionPane is a class that we can use. Now, the reason why it doesn't just automatically all exist in your project is because otherwise your project would be hundreds and hundreds of megabytes and hasn't even used anything. It's a very simple program, but it's going to be massive because it's got all the possible classes it can use in Java. So your program imports the classes or it needs to use. So in this case, we are going to import javax.swing.JOptionPane to use that. And we're going to go .show input dialog, and we're going to ask the user, please enter. What's the next thing that we need to ask? And the next thing? Do you guys see how fast it goes if you use, yeah, and you learn how to type properly. I should say that every now and again I make mistakes, but you know what I mean. It's important. It does help you to learn to type. Okay, int. The next is an int, and this is battery. Now, how do we remember? gr11 input dialog to get an input from the user, but we need to convert that into an integer. How do we do that? Integer.parseInt. To convert a string into an integer, you go integer.parseInt, and then you would then say inside your gr11 dialog, and you would say enter battery. I think it's battery is measured in NWA. No, MHW. Enter battery.
NWA.
Yeah, who knows? Now,
Ice Cube.
now in this case, we now want to add this phone. This is the user interface components of this is getting the user to input the values. But now we want to communicate with our working class to add this phone. So we go work.add phone. They would add the phone to the array. We then go display all. We then want to update our display. So get the user's input. Now later on you're not going to ask use gr11 input. You could actually make it part of your screen. Notes I could add text boxes and things in here, or I could create my own frame to allow me to add that. But then when I add phone, I now add it into my array, so I can now use that phone for future purposes.
Was messing around with UI and I made like a UI that had a box.
Sorry, I must pause the video record. Give me a second. And so, shall we test this? Or do you believe me that it, well, I'm sure you believe me that it works. Okay, so now I want to go new phone. So I'm just going to click here, new phone, enter manufacturer. Give me model.
A6.
I was going to say like the 5.
Enter date of release.
20, 40, 15 releases.
0804.
Okay, and then you'll see here enter battery.
5,800.
No, 9,000, sir. No, 9,000.
Oh yeah, true, 9,000. Over 9,000.
9,001, sir.
Yeah. It's from it's from Dragon Ball Z. Now, now you check here. Samsung S6 specs battery 9001. It added it to my list of phones. Now, this is important things to acknowledge here. My user interface will communicate to my working to add it to the array, so we can keep track of it. On that method, it adds it to the array because the array is holding what we are currently working with. Does that make sense? Later on, this add phones method should also actually send it through the same values through to add phone method on a storage class. I would have another class called storage class, which would then add the phone also to the storage, so that I could, when next time I run the program, it will load that phone on at the beginning. Does that make sense? At the moment though, our working just adds these 3 phones. At a later stage, my working class here would read from a text file, or read from a database, or read from somewhere. So it would read it, my add phone would add it to the array and add it to the storage, and this would read it from the storage. Does that make sense? But you would always need to rerun in your working class after you've done something. You often need to update the display, so you're displaying to the user what's going on. I think that's a bit to take in. It's 11:08. Oh, sorry, I'm stopped the video.